If you've ever wanted to make a Cyberdeck, there's never a better time than now. There are hundreds if not thousands of designs online, built around personalities, styles, and functionality. Chances are, there's a design already out there that fits what you want, but if there isn't or you just want to learn how to build your own, you can use this video as more of a reference guide when you want to build something from scratch. For me, the goal was portability. Things like programming a flight controller on location while using something like a MacBook gives me a little bit of anxiety, so I thought making a Cyberdeck would kind of just solve that issue. There are 4 main components I used for this build: an LCD touch display. I chose one that came with a built-in mount, specifically designed so that the Raspberry Pi can just bolt onto the back, which saved me from having to design my own mounting solutions. You're gonna need a single board computer. I had the Rock 4C Plus and a Raspberry Pi, but you can basically use whichever one you have access to. The third thing I needed was a power supply. I went with the Raspberry Pi UPS hat. You can find these surprisingly cheap on AliExpress. And then the last piece is a keyboard. Not strictly necessary, but genuinely worth having. It's better to have the keyboard and not need it than need it and not have it. And everything here was designed to be a plug and play. Since this was my first time working with a Raspberry Pi, the plan was going to be simple. Bolt everything using the provided hardware and not try anything fancy. Once it was physically assembled, I flashed the Raspberry Pi OS onto the SD card and popped it in, and it worked straight out of the box. There was no extra setup required. Honestly, I expected to have a mess around with drivers and configs or something like that, but this process probably took a fraction of the time. With the base system working, my focus shifts to 2 things: the power system and getting the keyboard talking to the Raspberry Pi. The keyboard itself came with a USB dongle, which could run on either 2 AAA batteries or off the board's own power pin. I went with the second option of just wiring it directly to the Raspberry Pi instead of having a second set of batteries just for the keyboard itself. By this point, I had a rough idea of what the final Cyberdeck would look like, and roughly how big it would be. That let me move into the designing phase of the project using my favorite CAD software. I spent a couple of hours nailing down the dimensions, pulling some measurements from the AliExpress listings, and also physically measuring my own Raspberry Pi and its display. And this is what I ended up with: a simple functional Cyberdeck. This base design will be available on my MakerWorld profile in Bamboo Lab. The main idea of the design was to keep the printing as simple as possible. Just 2 main pieces, so there was no need to complicate everything. The 2 main parts were the back plate and the front plate. On the back plate, you can see the battery housing just bolts on, and on the front plate, you've got the cutouts for the screen and the keyboard. The keyboard itself doesn't actually have bolts, but is instead sandwiched between the front and the rear plate. Once everything was set up, I got to printing.
One eternity later.
I started by placing the battery housing into the case and figuring out how I was going to route the cables, the UPS hat, charging port, and power buttons, which makes the entire thing easy to use. So I went through the whole process of mounting everything into the case before realizing I was using the wrong one. You can probably see in the video, but I was missing bolt holes at the very top because this print somehow had failed, so I was missing bolt holes and a whole 20% of the case. But once I got back on track, I routed the cables, connected the power to the Raspberry Pi, and then plugged in the keyboard cables. At this point, all that was left was just closing the front plate, but while fitting the front plate and the rear plates together, I noticed a bit of wiggle room in the keyboard space. So rather than reprint everything, I decided to just cut up a few bits of foam and place them right behind the keyboard. That way it would sit flush with the front face. From there, all that was left was just closing it up with some bolts, and somehow after that, everything just worked. And just like every good programmer, the first thing you write on a new computer when it's in terms of code, of course, is hello world. Hopefully you liked how the Cyberdeck turned out, and hopefully you enjoyed the video as well. If you're not subscribed already, consider it, and I'll see you in the next one.